Pay attention to this because it will literally save your life, your grade, everything. Hey guys, it's Claire from Clairified Creations, and today we're going to be talking about how I made an A in anatomy. Now I want to preface this video by saying, yes, I did make an A. Here is proof up here. My grade, the cutoff for an A was a 91.5 and I made a 92.45. So I wanted to share with you guys some of the things I learned because let me tell you, I definitely struggled in the beginning and it was an uphill battle all the way through. Anatomy is not an easy class and I'm a nursing major. I go to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. If you are in that class, I definitely feel for you. It was pretty challenging. Quick little disclaimer, due to COVID and the pandemic, my anatomy class was probably going to be really different from your guys's because it was fully online, including lab, so we didn't do any cadaver dissections or any of the things traditional to anatomy. I thought this video would be pretty applicable to all of the other types of classes, whether you're online, hybrid, or if you're fully in person. I think these tips can definitely apply to all three different scenarios, just depending on it. Let's talk about exams. Exam grades are probably going to be the most portion of your grade, so you definitely want to pay attention to them and try and do well if you possibly can, because most likely they're going to make up a huge percentage of your grade. The first two exams for me really didn't go well, and I will leave my scores up here. The first two exams I took were a struggle, you guys. They did not go well at all. My first exam, as you can see, was a thorax mini exam, and that was for the thorax, which means the lungs, the heart, that kind of thing, and I got a 70%. A 70. That is barely passing, and I'm pretty sure that's like a very low C or maybe a high D. I'm not really sure, but guys, a 70% on my first exam, that was pretty discouraging to say the least, and I felt terrible because I had been studying for this exam every day basically since anatomy started, and it was hard. My next exam was even worse. I made a 105.5 out of 150. There were some unfair questions though with matching issues, and after that, everybody basically didn't do so well on this exam, so my instructor made some major changes to the format and made the rest of the other exams open note, open book, unlimited time. Now, because these exams were so long, there were 150 questions. Because of all the issues with it, he ended up curving it 25 points, so I made a 130.5 out of 150. If I didn't have that curve, guys, I would have failed that exam. It was that bad. So, speaking about that, I definitely came back from a lot and I turned myself around pretty quickly after those first two exams, but I'd also say, you know, give yourself a break. If you don't do as well on the first exam or your first couple exams, it's not the end of the world and you can still make an A. You just really got to buckle down and get in that effort really fast. And finally, my last set of exams went a little bit better. I will show them up on the screen. The first thing I learned really fast is you need to study anatomy basically every day for at least an hour, maybe 2 hours, if at all possible. I know with college and just general life events, things happen and sometimes you're not able to do it every single day, but I'd highly recommend start early, even maybe a couple days before the class. Just see what you need to do, make a schedule, and stay on track because it is incredibly easy to fall behind in anatomy. It's such a fast pace. We have one semester, and honestly, I couldn't even imagine doing anatomy in the summer, but people do that. One semester to learn everything about the body, and you don't realize how many nerves, how many muscles, how many muscle actions, how many functions the body has. It's absolutely crazy, you guys. You're definitely not going to want to procrastinate anatomy. My next little bit of advice is probably going to vary depending on what school you go to, but if you guys have access to the lecture slides, definitely recommend printing them off and studying them. With my anatomy course, he gave out the lecture slides and we could either print them or digitalize them. I have an iPad, so that's what I use to study, and I would just go through and study the lecture slides. Because ultimately, if your professor is more lecture-based, and you will be able to tell based on your first exam what he wants you to focus on, but if that is the case, highly recommend just studying the lecture slides because ultimately that's what you're going to be tested on. I learned some kind of unfortunate things that didn't work, but I'll discuss that later. Next, record or rewatch your lectures. So my format was fully online and he did that asynchronously. We had due dates on when we had to watch the lectures by, so he made YouTube videos and I always watched them way more than once. I think I've watched some of the videos 5 times, I'm not even kidding, but you really need more exposure to the material. The more exposure you can get to that material, the better it's gonna stick right up here in your brain so you don't forget it. There's a lot of nitty-gritty details about anatomy that can just fly through the cracks the first time, so I really recommend going over your lectures if that's an option for you. If you guys don't have access to that, say you're in a fully in-person classroom setting, if you are able to use your phone, your iPad, even your laptop, I'm sure there's apps that you can download, or voice memos if you have an iPhone, record the lectures and go back and listen to them. Another way you could do this is, if you are kind of allowed to, you could probably take an actual video of this depending on how much space you have on your phone or your recording device. How much space do you want to devote to anatomy? But that is completely up to you. Another thing you could also do is ask your professor if they will post the lectures online or if someone will record it for you. The worst they can do is say no. My studying technique to approaching anatomy was learning things in segments. So one day I would learn, okay, this is the heart. I want to just learn the blood flow of the heart. And I would focus on that for a certain allotted time. And the next day I'm like, okay, I want to learn the anatomy of the lungs, the anatomy of the ribs. It's definitely a slow process, which is why you guys need to start studying early. But if you can break up the information into different segments, day by day, hour by hour, say you want to learn 2 things today, which is just the heart and maybe some basic blood flow. That would be great for you guys. You might also be wondering how I studied. I drew a lot of things out, and also recommend getting yourself a dad or another friend, someone that is willing to kind of go in on you and help you out, because a lot of times you're going to be focused on studying and you don't always have time to, draw the blood flow out of the heart, draw the blood flow through the lower limbs. I was very fortunate to have a dad that was willing to help me and draw these amazing posters, so shout out to my dad for doing that. That was so kind of you, and I'll definitely leave some images up here of what I'm talking about. So say you want to learn the blood flow through the lower limbs, you just kind of take it step by step and draw it out on a big piece of paper, so that way you can kind of look through it and see what you need to learn and everything like that. Also recommend color coding. Color coding is great, so that way you can find things easily and you're not just looking at a bunch of black pencil marks. Get a planner, you guys. You definitely need to stay organized throughout this craziness of your life. Trust me when I say this, you need a planner. They are super cheap. You can find them at Marshall's, TJ Maxx, any of those stores, Amazon, for only a few dollars, and it is totally worth the money. Another thing that really helped me was developing mnemonic devices, especially for things that were really complicated, had a lot of parts to it. I would look at it and be like, okay, let's make a really silly device that only Claire could remember. And it helped me so much for remembering locations and even just different functions of things, because I was like, okay, monkey means this. The next bit of information I have to share is probably going to be a bit of a shocker to you guys, and I want you guys to hear me out first. Here's a secret. Don't use the textbook. Now, I'm probably going to get a lot of backlash. This definitely varies depending on your class, but for my specific class and from my experience, I didn't even need the textbook. So let me explain. I started using the textbook as soon as we started class because I was like, I need it. And he said that we would need it. And every single lecture, he was like, guys, read the textbook before you watch the lectures. And I did. What was really important to me was the lecture slides. Go based on your instructor. Is the instructor really just going to focus on the textbook material, or are his exams more based on the lectures? But I'm guessing it's probably going to be based towards the lectures and what he says in lecture. However, I do recommend the Anatomy Atlas. If you guys don't know what an atlas is, it's basically just a bunch of pictures. There really isn't many words. And don't get me wrong, I did use the textbook a little bit for exams because they were open note towards the end of them. While I've been editing this video, I thought of another tip that that will be really useful for you guys, which is to do anatomy with friends. My friend and I would always compare our lab worksheets at least a few times, and whenever we did compare, I always felt so much better about things. So if you guys can get a study group together, get some friends to help you out, kind of split up the work. This is probably the biggest tip I have for you, the most important information. So if you haven't learned anything from this point, pay attention to this because it will literally save your life, your grade, everything. I cannot stress this enough. You need to download Visible Body right now. If you're in anatomy, you're about to take anatomy, and you look at the price, because this is an app and it is a little bit on the pricier side, I should probably tell you what Visible Body is. So it's an app that shows 3D anatomical relationships. It has so many cool features, and I'm just gonna do a little screen recording on my iPad to show you guys what I mean. Even if you guys don't have an iPad, still get this app. My best friend downloaded the app on her iPhone and it worked pretty well for her. Definitely the bigger the screen size, obviously the better, because you'll be able to see it a little bit better. But whatever you have, even if you just have a phone, it is completely worth it. The app is $19.99, so it's about $20. But seriously, the best Andrew Jackson you will ever spend in your entire life. If you're gonna go on to anything medical related, or if you need this for a medical profession, pursuit, whatever you're doing this for, you're gonna probably need to use it again. Here is what it looks like. You can see I have just a regular demo of this. This is the head and neck. I'll go through everything. You can see there's anything from bones, structures, systems. You can see everything on here about the body. You can change the gender, female to male. You can see all the muscles, and the best part is if you click on it, it will tell you literally everything about that muscle. So the origin, the insertion. This is especially helpful for muscle exams to learn the origins and everything. And then the blood supply. If you want to learn blood flow, stop what you're doing and get this app, and you will be able to learn blood flow so much easier, because you can just say, okay, there's the inferior vena cava. That goes up to the brachiocephalic trunk. And you can just work your way up there. And it is so amazing. You can also dissect things, take away, just keep on going and see everything, which is insanely cool. You can do virtual reality. You can isolate things, so say you don't want the lymphatic system, gone. Everything about this app, so helpful. Download it and you will never look back. The one thing I do need to mention about it, you do need to have a touchscreen device. You can use it on your computer, and if your school has the little access thing, you can get it for free on your computer. And I did that for the first maybe week or two, but once I downloaded it on the mobile device, it is so much better, way more helpful. So definitely have something that's touchscreen and you can just kind of maneuver with your fingers rather than a mouse, because it just really doesn't work the same. Let's move on to lab practical exams. What those are pure memorization, pure identification. So whether you have a cadaver and you have to identify things, whether you have images on a computer and they're like, okay, what's this structure? Depending on your professor, you're probably going to have to take at least a few of these. For my specific class, we were given models since we couldn't use cadavers because you can't take images of cadavers and upload them for the university. We used still pictures of models, and I will insert a picture up here so you guys know what I'm talking about. And then they were all labeled, and what we would do is we would study those labels and just be able to identify them. And on the exam, there were 50 questions, so we had 50 points worth of questions about them, and it was just pure identification, memorization. You either knew it or you didn't. What I recommend to study with this is to go back, either look at Visible Body, start getting familiar with that at least about, I'd say at least 10 days to a week before the lab exam. You really need to start getting serious. It's not something that you have to study every day for, but what worked best for me was just going over the images over and over and over so I could get that down. The way I tested myself to make sure I really knew the information, make sure I knew what the locations of everything was, by using a whiteboard, and I'll actually show you guys. Do you guys see this standard 12 by 12 inch whiteboard? Well, this thing was my best friend when it came to the lab exams. I would just write down things, so I'd number 1 through 10 like the image said, and I'd be like, okay, that's the superior vena cava, and I'd just go down the list without looking at the key. That's important. Don't look at the key. Actually treat this like a little mini quiz and see which ones you got right. And you're like, okay, I couldn't fill in 2 of them. So that means erase them all, study it, look at it again, and do the entire thing again. To make sure that I was really grounded in that information, I probably went a little bit overboard, but I did it 3 times, so as long as I got 3 100s on that one section, I would move on to the next picture. And that worked wonders for me. It was so easy, and it's just a really effective way of studying because that way you get that repetition stuck in your brain. If you guys are using cadavers, highly recommend going onto YouTube. I did this even though that really didn't apply to me. I was kind of curious to see what else was out there, and just look up cadavers for maybe the heart or cadavers for the brachial plexus. I'm sure there'll be plenty of different videos about that, so go on to YouTube, use your resources online, and just look at different cadavers, different models, different aspects of cadavers, anything like that, or 3D visible body, like I said, is huge. It can seriously save you in every aspect of anatomy. When in doubt, go to visible body and they will have the answer for you. A lot of times we had such a large amount of images to learn. I would like to break it up to probably about 10 a day, 5 to 10 per day, and I give myself a little bit of a chance to recover from all that information. I typically studied around 1 to 2 hours, sometimes 3, for about a week leading up to the exam, so just kind of factor that in. Make sure you know how much time you want to devote to it, how much time it'll take. That way you can kind of plan accordingly. Also, I wanted to mention here were my grades for the lab practicals. You can see I did so much better on these. These are definitely going to be grade boosters. I wanted to say that I did get burnt out towards the end of my last lab practical. I didn't want to do it anymore, but guys, if you're feeling the same way, which I am sure at some point you will hit a wall and be like, I'm done, I can't take any more anatomy, I quit. I definitely came up to that point, but it is so important to just regroup and keep going. I experienced that a few days before my last practical, and I was like, I really need a good grade to get that A. But I was just looking at things and I was staring at the screen for maybe an hour and I was like, I don't know it. I can't do this. I took an entire day, maybe 3 days before my final lab exam because I just needed that break. And it's okay to take that break. I know it seems like a lot, but trust me, if you are just staring at the page for an hour and you can't get anything else down, stop what you're doing and come back to it at a later time, and it'll definitely help you guys out. Always remember what you're working for. Comment down below some tips you have for other students in anatomy, and I'll see you guys later. Remember, you are loved.